We do have a ton to get through in this episode.
Common sense is finally prevailing.
There was controversy this month, Dave.
I'm not particularly excited by that.
Secrets and things on set.
I haven't told them anything.
I think this is just good times all round.
Every Doctor Who is liked by somebody, and that's a really good thing.
Davo, my doctor.
I know we disagree on this one.
First world problems, Dave.
I get why fans are asking those questions.
Oh gosh, that's actually quite a lot to talk about.
It doesn't compute.
It's the elephant in the room.
That's okay.
Fandom versus the BBC.
The cardinal sin.
Moving along.
Lunch. Hello and welcome to the Doctor Who show. I'm Dave.
And I'm Rob.
And we are here for the month of March.
Yes, the Ides of March have passed.
The Ides of March have passed, St. Patrick's Day has passed. We are ready to do our Doctor Who show. How are you, Rob?
I am very well, Dave. I believe you're in our nation's capital tonight.
I am in our nation's capital, which has been mentioned in at least 2 Doctor Who stories that I can think of.
Very good.
Listeners, tweet us if you know which 2 they are. Yes, no, thank you for rolling with me on our recording night. It's always a little bit weird when I'm up in Canberra and I have to send you messages like, I can't do Wednesday, I'm having dinner with the Lithuanian ambassador. and feel very self-conscious saying things like that.
Yeah. Well, I won't name names, but the other day I passed a comment to you about something. You said, oh, yes, I was just talking to about that. And I was like, oh, really?
Oh, yes, that's true, yes. I was name-dropping in a bit, but I literally was having that conversation, so...
It's pretty wild.
Yes, so I'm here in a hotel in Canberra. You are in your normal abode in Doctor Who show headquarters.
Yes.
And we are here to do something I'm very, very interested in because our episode tonight is titled The Ultimate Jodie Whittaker Cold Take.
Yes.
And this all came about because, Rob, you and I had the conversation where we said, look, the Jodie Whittaker, Chris Chibnall era has ended. We have done many, many hot takes where we've talked about each individual episode and special right there, sometimes literally minutes after we finished watching it. So we've had lots of red hot takes, but we haven't sat back and done a bit of a consolidation of the era and a look back at the era. And then we realised that neither of us had actually gone back and rewatched any of the era.
Not one,
which I think is... Look, I won't go into why that might be, but it was an interesting thing. So we said, well, let's each watch some of the era and see what we think of it now that it's much, much colder. Now we have all these episodes in the context of the entire era, in the context in which they were shown. We're not watching it trying to work out what's going to happen next and what does this mean for the series and what does this mean for Jodie Whittaker's Doctor. We're just watching them. And look, we'll talk about this more when we get to our main topic, but we've approached it in different ways. We have done some rewatching. We have lots of comments, but I'm genuinely interested to find out what you thought of some of these episodes looking back nice and cold.
Yeah, I'll say, because the hot take concept, some people can say, well, it's dangerous because you're just reacting, you're running on emotions, and that's true sometimes. You see something for the first time and you react for better or worse.
Absolutely.
And people say, there may be a better way. But I think they're valuable because they are capturing that first rush of emotions and the first thoughts that come into your head. I love doing the hot takes, but conversely, once you sit where we are now and do a cold take, it's a whole different ball game, I've found.
And we've always been very honest that we know that in a hot take we're going to miss things, that we're approaching it in a certain way. It is a very flawed process to do an assessment of an episode, but it is, as you say, a genuine reaction straight there, in the way that we as fans are thinking. So this is going to be very different and we're going to be looking back, but we have a few things to talk about first. I do need to mention that since we last spoke, I have bought my ticket to the Sirens of Audio convention in Sydney in May with Sophie Aldred, and I wasn't able to get to the Janet Fielding event. I have to work that day, actually, but I understand at the time we record, Janet is in the country and in fact has been chatting to you on Twitter, I saw.
Yes, she's now following the Doctor Who show feed on Twitter. I don't know how that came up, but she does, and she retweets us and she talks to us, and it's a lovely thing.
It absolutely is. So, look, if you are somebody who is in Australia, particularly on the East Coast, they're doing events in Hobart, Sydney, Brisbane with various different companions over the next 4 to 6 weeks. Go and check out the Sirens of Audio website and have a look. They're very well priced. The organisers there are very keen to do old school run by the fans, for the fans type event, and so I'm actually quite excited to get along to one.
Yeah, and I'll say my mate Rob McKnight, who I used to be in the local Time Flight Club with, he's now a media personality, does a lot of radio up in Brisbane at present. He has interviewed Janet in the last few days, and in that interview, which Sirens of Audio are now using as promotional material, he mentions that the Brisbane event is 150 people max. So it is a very small event versus, say, a Supernova or an Oz Comic Con or something like that. 150 is tiny, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. So there'll be that chance to actually hear from the guests, to meet the guests, get your autographs, all the rest of it. So, look, enough of a plug. I'm going, and hopefully I'll see some of you there.
Absolutely.
Moving on to the news, things have quietened down a bit as far as the main show is concerned. I think there was that rush of news when they were doing their filming, and now they've gone away a bit, and I think we'll start to get that build-up of properly announced news as we get towards the next season coming out. But we are now getting a lot more speculation about the spin-offs. RTD is known for his spin-offs. Back in the day, he had the Sarah Jane Adventures and Totally Who and Torchwood and all the rest of it, so we know that that's the kind of universe he wants to build. We know that he's got the money to do it. And the Radio Times, amongst other sources, are speculating that they are going to be doing a unit spin-off. If I can quote from one article, the reported unit spin-off is currently being envisaged as a Torchwood-style offshoot of the main show. A key part of Torchwood's success was seeing characters and monsters from the main show cross over, and this could definitely happen again. What's your reaction to this, Rob?
Well, there are two reactions, really. One is that unit has never been well done in the modern era of Doctor Who, so there's a worry straight off the bat. The other is, though, that when they invoke something like Torchwood, you think, well, a more mature unit story, could we be moving into spooks territory? Could we be into that kind of drama? Because that was a very good show that I really enjoyed. Could it become something in its own right with a little bit more of an adult feel that's very good? Something that's not a childish monster of the week thing like maybe the Sarah Jane Adventures were, pitched at a younger audience, but something pitched at an older audience, with people getting around, aliens. Could it be a bit X-Files-ish even? I don't know. So look, I see potential, but the way unit has been handled in the modern era gives me pause for thought. Can I say that?
Look, you can, because that is very much an echo of my thoughts. Whatever they do, I'm going to check it out. I'm very curious to see what RTD does with all of these different spin-offs. And look, as you say, the beauty of a spin-off, whether it's Class or Torchwood or Sarah Jane, etc., is that you can skew it to a slightly different demographic. You can go older, you can go younger. Interesting that you sort of associated it with Torchwood and said, let's go a bit older, because I sort of thought maybe it's going to be a bit more of that Sarah Jane, Scooby-Doo, fighting aliens and having fun type of a show. The reality is we don't even know. In fact, we don't even know for sure this show is happening.
No.
But like you, I don't think Unit has been handled well in the new series. I think it is very obvious that in contrast to classic Who, where Unit was set up by people who had served, in some cases served in World War II, done military service, done national service, or had friends and relatives who had, and there's a real sort of understanding of the military. It's very obvious that New Who is written by people who have absolutely no concept of how the military really works. It's often a bit of a sort of a satire and a not very educated one.
Well, even actors had been in the military, like a John Pertwee type. So, you've got the Third Doctor working with Unit, and the actor knows how the military works.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick Troughton was exactly the same.
Yeah.
And Barry Letts and a whole bunch of others. Douglas Camfield was in the army for a time, or at least the Territorials. So yeah, I think that lack of knowledge does show in the new series. So that, like you, I have that element of caution. But look, let's see what is formally announced. Let's see what the cast looks like. Is it going to be all of the Unit's scientific wing? Or is it going to be Kate Stewart and a bunch of military people? Is it going to have ex-companions in it? Is it going to have current companions in it? We don't know. I think that's enough speculation for now.
Well, as I say, I'd like to see, Kate Stewart and some agents in plain clothes, so more like an MI6 kind of thing going on. But that's just me.
Yeah, I must admit I hadn't thought about it in that much depth. So, we'll see what it goes. What have you got for us, Rob?
Dave, I've got another spin-off here to talk about, Doomsday. This is a multi-platform story announced earlier this week, which will be told through books, comics, audio, and more, apparently. And gosh, didn't this kind of thing work out well when they did Time Lord Victorious a few years back? But I digress. Have you seen the video trailer for this, Dave?
I have seen the video trailer for it. In fact, given that it's had now several million views, I don't think I could have helped but see the video trailer. It has certainly gone viral, and the marketing there, I think, will be very happy with themselves. Look, it's attracted a lot of criticism. Mm-hmm. I think some of it, perfectly reasonable and perfectly valid. I can see why the criticism's been made. As always, there are those people that just take it to, stupid and unnecessarily strong places, and that's a shame, but that is social media in the 2020s, let's be honest. Look, I saw it, and my first reaction was kind of, look, this doesn't seem like it's something aimed at me, so I'll just move on. I did get a real sort of kids' TV vibe. And, it very much felt like the Teabag franchise, for those of you who grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. It had that sort of a vibe to me. And I sort of thought, okay, maybe they're doing a real sort of kids type spin-off, and that's fine. It's not for an old bloke like me, so I don't need to really care. I then did wonder, because I saw some of your comments, Rob, and I'm sure you'll expand on what you said in a moment, but I did I did think that maybe it is being deliberately shot in this way or put up in this way, and that maybe that's because it's linked into something like the villain that we are expecting in the upcoming Tennant specials, who is involved in games, and so maybe it is very deliberately a pastiche or a homage to bad computer games, particularly sort of something like Destiny of the Doctors, which is another sort of vibe I got from that very sort of Anthony Ainley, like, I'm here doing a computer game, ha ha. Because that's the kind of the feeling I got.
Yeah.
So maybe that is a very deliberate vibe, which I think echoes something you said. But yeah, your thoughts, Rob.
I have so many thoughts, Dave. I'll try and keep it brief. If people have seen me ranting on Twitter, they may have already heard some of this. In my world, a trailer needs to be appealing. It needs to draw people in, not send them running for the hills, or at best left scratching their heads and wondering, well, could it mean this? Could it mean that? So we have Doom, and she's played by UK comedian Suze Kempner. She's addressing the audience as if they're about 5 years old.
Yes.
Declaring she's the universe's greatest assassin, and she needs to find the Doctor, because she's being pursued by death. And cards on the table, Dave, I think this looks absolutely tragic. It's pantomime level sort of acting. The backgrounds to the video look cheap. The lighting is way too bright. And in fact, I made a comparison today on Twitter showing her on the cover of a Big Finish release. In the same costume, same location, she looks a million times better on that cover than she does in the video. It's all down to colour grading and lighting and things like that. The costume looks like it's never been outdoors. It's just grim. And I've been saying to people that I hope there's some sort of comedic twist. I mean, they do have a comedian playing this character. So maybe she's not as big and bad as she thinks she is and just doesn't realise it. But if you were going in that comedy direction, why not add more of a wink and a nod to the trailer so that the audience gets what you're doing? She could be saying something like, I'm the universe's greatest assassin. Well, I say greatest, I'm all right. Okay, I haven't actually killed anyone, but I'm trying really hard. If it was like that, if that's the vibe, you would instantly get what it's trying to be. And I don't know if it is going to be like that, but if it was, I think you need that in the trailer. Something that would show how we're meant to take this. Presently, it's just, I'm the universe's greatest assassin, and we've got to take it on face value. Even though, as you identify, she's more of a children's TV presenter. She's jumping at her own shadow in the clip. No one in their right mind would buy that this is the universe's greatest assassin. But I'll be keeping an eye on it. If it does have a comedy twist, I think it could be quite entertaining. But again, that should be telegraphed from the start, not left ambiguous and left to me saying, well, maybe it'll be funny, and you're saying, well, maybe it'll be related to this villain. Again, a trailer's job is to interest people, not send them running, and I think this has sent a lot of people running straight off the bat.
I think that that's right, but I guess if you say the other job of a trailer is simply to get out name ID, this has certainly worked, because I've seen this shared or commented on social media literally dozens of times in the last 2 or 3 days. Yeah. So it has attracted that discussion. Look, I'm kind of with you. I agree that it looks bad, but it is so obviously bad that I can't believe any director or producer or studio executive didn't notice and let it pass. So that implies to me that it must be a choice. Maybe
you would think so.
You would think so. So look again. We're speculating, but look, I mean, if the aim is to get people talking about it, well, we've just talked about it on our podcast. So
yeah,
that part of the marketing has worked. Whether, as you say, people bother to tune in, I don't know.
Yeah, and look, I join with you in saying there have been vile comments made about Suze Kempner herself.
Yes.
And that's just way out of line. You know, all the stuff I'm talking here is about how it's presented, how it looks visually, all of that stuff. And I'm open to seeing how it goes once it launches. But people just going after her directly, just vile, horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, either she's been asked to do it that way, or she's been hired because she's that kind of a comedic actor. So she's done what she was paid to do.
Yeah, exactly. Just like Hayden Christensen in episode 2 of Star Wars. George Lucas wanted him to act like that, guys. It's not his fault.
No, exactly right. Exactly right. On to our short topics, and I will lead off with this. Now, in the last month, Rob, I've had a couple of fairly decent road trips. I was off to a wedding in Warrnambool, which was about a 6 and a bit hour round trip.
Oh, and lovely.
I did go down for work to the Avalon Airshow Trade Day, which was another sort of 4 or 5 hour round trip.
I would have loved that.
I'll tell you off mic some of the things we got to do.
Fantastic.
But it was very, very cool. F-35 sim.
Oh,
yeah.
Tasty.
Yeah, it was fun. But as I do when I have a couple of big road trips, I go and buy and download some Big Finish. So I have listened to some Big Finish this month, and I'll just give you a very quick overview of what I've heard. So I did listen to the New Adventures adaptation, All Consuming Fire.
Yep.
Which I really enjoyed. It was a very good presentation. McCoy was really good. Benny Summerfield and Ace were really good. I did think it struggled a little bit because for me, one of the highlights of that novel is the alien landscape that's constructed and is the very strange, large monster that we sort of get at the end of it, which a book can do really, really well. It can spend pages talking about this strange environment with the inversed sky and the ice deck above and all the rest of it. And you can't do that nearly as well as in an audio unless you make which would be the wrong decision for characters to spend several minutes saying, look over there at the way the mountains have done. Like, you're not going to have that.
Yeah.
So I think it lost a bit of the grandeur that I really liked from the novel, which is a shame. And again, the ending was a bit rushed. I thought what you can spend pages describing action on audio is just sort of a few seconds of bang bang done, if you like. Which was a shame. Nick Briggs plays Sherlock Holmes in it. I'm not quite sure what he was going for, but he seemed to be having fun, so that's okay. But look, overall, it was enjoyable. One you recommended, Rob, is The Sword of Orion.
Yes.
Which I thought was a really good adventure. Like a lot of Big Finish, it's a little bit long and could have been truncated down a little bit if they'd really been more disciplined and stuck to strict 25-minute episodes. I think it's my first Began audio. And he did a really good job. The companion, I thought, was very generic, and I can't even remember her name, I'm sorry. Charlie, there you go. I didn't get a lot out of Charlie. I just thought she was sort of generic female companion. But it was a good story. The things I was sitting there going, that doesn't seem right. Is that a plot hole? An episode later you go, it wasn't a plot hole, it was a clue, yes. So it worked really, really well on that level. I was quite engrossed. I thought it did well. The Cybermen were really cool. Not quite sure what Nick Briggs was doing with the cyber voices, but, whatever. He has to do all the voices. It's in his contract or something. So that was really good. The One Doctor is another one that everyone keeps telling me I have to listen to. And look, listening to it, I absolutely get why. It's very fun. It's very clever. It's not a story you could do in that style often. It sort of needs to be a bit of a one-note sort of offbeat sort of thing. But look, it is very clever. I did like the fact that the pretense or the conceit of the episode was kind of acknowledged and dealt with fairly quickly, and then they got on with having the adventure and sort of doing a few things from there. So that worked out well. That was fun. And The Secrets of Det Sen, which is it's what they used to call a companion chronicles. Now they've sort of made them halfway between a companion chronicle and a proper adventure, but it had Peter Purves, who did a really good job. It's a prequel to The Abominable Snowman, and so there were a couple of things that I think were meant to be surprises. But look, if you know that they're setting up The Abominable Snowman, you kind of know where it's going to go. But it was really lovely. It was really evocative. I think it caught the Hartnell era atmosphere really well. It had the right sort of pacing, the right sort of ideas. I thought they sort of captured the Himalayas as a soundscape, really, really well. Peter Purves was really good as Stephen. I'm not sure that his Hartnell was particularly good.
Right.
I know that's not a universal opinion. Some people really like his Hartnell, but it's not for me. It's not as bad as Fraser Hines Troughton.
So this is Hartnell going in and getting the device that's very important in The Abominable Snowman and meeting up with Tara Masalada or whatever his name
Padma
is.
Sambhavar, yes.
There we go.
Yes. Yeah, so look, that was really nice. I enjoyed that. And finally, I did listen to Class, The Secret Diary of a Rhodian Prince, because I did enjoy Class, and I did think Greg Austin was really good in Class, and so having him do a little bit of a spin-off thing was really good, and I really enjoyed that. It was really fun, and I was quite disappointed to find out, like Class, it doesn't seem to have a sequel, so hopefully it comes out, but at the moment it doesn't. So look, just a few big finishes from me. I'm not a huge Big Finish listener, but when the opportunity presents, I do dip in.
Very good. My first short topic this month, Dave, is, as many listeners will already know if they follow the show on social media, I had a bit of a spurt of motivation over the past week and some spare time to do a reshoot of some scenes, and I've actually finished and uploaded my I Was a Teenage Time Lord piece. I have, which is a video account of what it was like to record with the afternoon show, doing a Doctor Who quiz back in November of 1988. This, of course, is following on from that footage being found and digitised recently by a Sydney fan named Scott Wilcoxon in February. And now people can see and hear me talk about what the afternoon show was and who the host was and how I was picked to be on the show and what it was like to be in the studio on that day, even what happened the following week at school. Now, I think you've seen this, Dave. What did you think?
I have seen it. I've got to say, I was very impressed. I'll be honest, when you said you were making a documentary about this, I was a little bit sort of like, okay, I don't know where Rob's going with this one. Not quite sure what this is going to be like, because it's not something we've sort of done before, and so I was a little bit curious. But I thought you captured that moment in Australian Who history really well, and obviously from a very personal perspective. And I do think it is actually particularly interesting and particularly important because it is representative of a massive turning point in the story of Doctor Who in Australia, because as you have captured, the switch of Doctor Who from paired with something like The Goodies or Yes Minister and leading into the 7pm news, the switch from that to now part of a kids magazine program in the early afternoon after school with a presenter who very clearly doesn't want to be there and doesn't like the show. It's just that real moment where Who went from being mainstream staple family viewing, as I say, leading into the ABC News, which was at the time it was the big evening bulletin, to like, we're just throwing this out with the kids stuff and let's just get it on. So I thought you captured that moment really well, and that was really interesting. Plus, of course, there were faces there that are people who I've since met: your Tony Cooks, your Dallas Joneses, Kate Orman, of course, and of course people that are now listeners and people we interloculate with on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. And You know, you mentioned it was a personal story, and that is absolutely by design, because as soon as I was talking about this on Twitter, people were saying to me, are you going to interview James Valentine? Are you going to get all the other people from the quiz? And like, truth be told, yes, I could probably do that. James Valentine's right there on Twitter. He's spoken to me over Twitter before. Dallas Jones listens to the show. Mark Douglas is over there in the UK listening to us right now.
Yes, hello, Mark.
Yeah, hello, Mark. And so on and so forth. Kate Orman's out there. In fact, when the footage was found, I emailed Kate and told her. She was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, so all these people are available. Yes, I could have done that. And as I even hinted on the video, maybe there's another video begging to be made one day. But this was my story. And I'm unapologetic about that. This is my personal, this is what happened on the day, this is what happened to me, this is why I was there, blah, 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 blah. We could perhaps do something else at some stage, but for now, this was just meant to be a personal story. It wasn't meant to be everyone, you know, as a talking head sort of thing.
Yeah, no, and that was your mission, and as I say, you did succeed in that. But honestly, and I'm not saying this just because you're my podcasting companion,
Yes.
don't undersell it, because as I said, you do capture where the show was in Australia in 1988. And I won't say it was in a bad place, certainly not. I mean, we just got Remembrance of the Daleks. But it was in a different place, and I think the start of the decline of the show in Australia was when that switch in time slot happened.
Well, I would say the vibe of season 24 fits perfectly with the afternoon show.
Look, that's true as well. That's fair as well.
Because it is quite childish and colourful and, you know, campy and such, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could watch The Mysterious Cities of Gold and The Ghosts of Motley Hall and go straight into Time of the Rani. I do get that. So, look, we won't analyse it any further because it's there on YouTube to watch.
Yes, please do watch it.
But yeah, no, well done. Second short topic from me, I just wanted to mention that over the last few weeks, I did rewatch my all-time favourite season of Doctor Who, which is season 7. I hadn't watched it all the way through for quite a while, and I did make a point, as I do when I'm rewatching episodes and stories for the podcast, I did make a point that this would not be background watching, I wouldn't be multi-screen or anything like that. I was going to sit down and watch it, and I did. And wow, I just had a great time. I really, really did. It was just so wonderful to sit there and allow myself to be immersed in 4, in my view, absolutely classic stories. Yeah. I haven't watched Spearhead for a long time, partly because it was one of the first stories I ever saw, and it was one of the first stories that we had on as an off-air dub when Dad bought a VCR back in about 1984-85. We recorded most of season 7 then, so I grew up very, very familiar with Spearhead, and I think that sort of meant I haven't wanted to go back to it as much. But watching it again after a several-year break, I really just appreciated how much is going on, how clever it is, how expensive it looks. And in fact, the whole season just looks spectacular. There are large crowd scenes, large numbers of characters and extras, lots of locations. Moving on to the Silurians, look, listeners know that's my favourite story. But again, watching the Silurians just build up from a very simple story in part 1 and then getting just a little bit more complicated and more terrifying every episode until it builds to a massive worldwide sort of climax was really fun. But again, the budget, how many Silurians there were, the location filming, I mean, dozens of people in Waterloo Station. I don't know how many were paid extras and how many were just very bemused passengers. But you've got, you know, multiple emergency services vehicles come in. It's really, really good. Ambassadors of Death, again, just extra layer of plot goes on. It becomes a little bit more complicated as it goes on. There's the first conspiracy twist, the next conspiracy twist, and then finally you get to Inferno, and I again haven't watched Inferno for a long time. And I was blown away by just how adult it really, really was, just how utterly soul-destroyingly terrifying that story is. And again, the older you get, the more you sort of think about these big worldwide events and how more you think about mortality and that sort of thing. And spending 2 episodes with characters who know that the world is going to end and they are going to die and how they deal with that. This is a kid's show from 1970.
I know. And 17 years later, you have time in the running.
Yeah, it's just so. Look, I could spend a whole podcast talking about how much I love season 7 and all 4 of those stories. But I just wanted to say, because I think sometimes as fans we sort of maybe go back and watch stories we don't normally watch, or we go back and watch stories we think are weak because we want to reevaluate them and see, are those bad to remember, or sometimes we watch seasons because we're on a podcast and we have to.
Yeah.
But the joy of watching stories I love so very much and just watching them again and enjoying them, I just thought it was such a wonderful experience. And listeners, if you haven't watched your favourite story or your favourite season for a while, what's stopping you?
Exactly.
Go do it.
Here. Finally, Dave, I have another YouTube-related short topic, and this relates to the way that I've been dabbling with making little news videos every now and then on the channel. So, as well as getting a sort of greatest hits of our past shows edited for the medium, which we've been dropping there for like a year now. So there's a lot of our old shows up there if you ever want to re-listen to them without the big intros and things like that. You'll now start getting random, very random, I want to reinforce, little pieces from me. It's not something I'm trying to do every day or even every week. It's just when the mood strikes. So if you don't want to miss them, head over to youtube.com/@the DW Show and subscribe to us there, ring the bell. And whenever I do one of these odd little news pieces, it'll pop up in your feed.
Yeah, what I like about this is, as you've said, it's very random and it's not something you feel the obligation to do. It's just when you genuinely have something to say, you say it. And I think that really, really works. It's kind of like my Twitter feed. There will be times where I have lots to say and I'll be flooding your feed with all these thoughts, and then I'll have a week where I have nothing to say. And and I think I see that in what you're doing with the news. You know, if you've got a point you want to make, you make it. And if it takes you 30 seconds, it takes you 30 seconds. If it takes you 5 minutes, it takes you 5 minutes. So it's not something you're doing just to get likes or to build an audience per se. It's just kind of like our podcast. We're just putting it out there, and whoever listens.
Even the hits we get are very random. It's like, here's a story about Ncuti Gatwa's costume. Thousands of hits. Here's a story about Stephen Moffat returning to write for Doctor Who. 300 hits. It's like, how do you even figure out how this algorithm works? I have no idea.
No. And look, again, it's the same with Twitter. I had 2 tweets, one on each of my accounts, get well over 10,000 tweets in the last week. And I have no idea what the secret source that was that got it, and something else got 47 views. So
yeah. What is it?
I don't know.
Brilliant.
We need to move to our main topic, Rob, because we have a whole era to talk about.
We do.
In the ultimate Jodie Whittaker cold take. Now, we've explained the topic. We've explained why we're doing it. And what we agreed on, to sort of give some structure to this conversation and to make sure that we could do this within the time frame of a podcast episode, was we agreed we would each go and watch 6 episodes of the Jodie Whittaker, Chris Chibnall era, and we would use those to sort of hang our thoughts on and kind of go back and reassess the era. Now, in our conversation since, I think it's turned out we've kind of taken that assignment in very different ways, which is our want. As is our want, and as our cool thing. And sometimes we very deliberately do that. We say, look, you go away and prep, I'll go away and prep, and we'll come back. And sometimes we're very in sync, and sometimes we've done it very, very differently.
Yes.
And I know, Rob, you sent me some notes saying that you had a very structured way that you made very careful decisions about which 6 episode you'd watch and why and how you do it. I kind of just put on the TV, scrolled to the Doctor Who menu and went, I think I'll watch that one. And,
right.
And so we've approached it in very different ways. And so, look, what we're going to do is I'm going to give some opening thoughts, and you may have some comments in reply. We'll see. You're going to give us some closing thoughts and see if you came to the same place I did. But in between, we're going to go through the list of Chibnall era stories. And if one of us has watched that episode and wants to talk about it, what do we do? Should we shout Chibbers?
Yeah, something like that.
We'll shout something like Chibbers, and we'll talk about it. So, look, to kick us off, I'm going to make an opening comment here, Rob. And my opening comment is, I think that this era of Doctor Who is going to age very well. I think that there is a lot of positivity in this era. There is a lot more fun in this era than I remember from when I was watching it, and the future of the show seemed to be at stake every time you watch a new episode because we're fans and that's how we feel. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. Am I about to talk about 6 classic episodes? I'm definitely not. But watching each episode on its own, just for fun, I found it was very, very easy. It was very, very enjoyable. I found Jodie Whittaker's Doctor in that more relaxed environment, and just tuning in and watching some Doctor Who worked much better than I remembered. So whilst I'm going to have some negatives to talk about, my opening gambit, my opening takeaway is this era, it may not be mentioned as the new series Hinchcliffe era or the Letts era, but I think it's going to be remembered quite fondly as people come back to it.
Another thing I'll throw in there as we begin is something we're not probably thinking about here is ratings. When you're watching these go out week after week and watching the ratings go down, 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 that comes into the conversation. But here, where it's just, I am putting on this story and watching it as a story, I wasn't thinking about ratings for any of these.
No, I hadn't even thought about it until then.
There you go.
There you go. So, look, let's get going. I'll start reading some episodes. Let's see how long we have until one of us has watched one.
Until we get a Chippers.
The Woman Who Fell to Earth. The Ghost Monument. Chippers!
Okay, off we go.
Look, so I did watch episode 2, The Ghost Monument, and this, I think, to me, did set up the very positive experience I had rewatching the Jodie era. As a standalone, it works far, far better than it does as the second of the series, where we're trying to work out what the series is about and how is Chibnall going to write and how is Jodie Whittaker going to work and how does this series all work and is it part of an arc and does this mean something and you know, when you divorce yourself from all of that, you just go, I'm going to watch this story and I know that it means nothing. I know that it's going nowhere. In terms of sort of the big picture, I just thought this is a really great adventure. I think that the main conceit of these two people doing some sort of amazing race survivor type intergalactic game is a really cool idea, and it's one of those things of Doctor Who taking from pop culture and making it a Doctor Who thing. It looks stunning. It absolutely looks stunning. It does have that mention of the timeless child, which I must admit did make me sort of sit up in my seat and go, "Oh, that's right, that happened there. Shame nothing happened to that." And look, it's interesting. Even in this one, I can see what we know is going to become the Doctor and Graham show. I can see the seeds of that already happening, and Bradley Walsh is really, really good in it. The ending, the whole bit where the Doctor gets a bit depressed, it is a bit naff, but it looks good. I found her really easy to watch, and I thought this was a really good adventure. Classic? No, but just a fun, good-looking adventure.
Yeah, look, I think it is. Obviously, it's not one that I've rewatched here, otherwise I would have called Chibbers too. But I think what you're saying there is on point and plays into this idea of when you watch these things in isolation, they lift up a bit.
Well, they certainly can. We'll continue with the list.
Okay.
Rosa.
Rosa, yeah.
Arachnids in the UK. The Saranga Conundrum.
Chibbers!
Excellent. You watched the Saranga Conundrum. What did you think?
I did. Well, look, first of all, I'll say, Dave, you mentioned earlier that I had a scientific method at play here. I'll just say that I selected my 6 stories from Jodie's first 2 series, as Flux felt a bit too recent to me.
Let me say I felt the same thing as well. With only 6 episodes to watch and so many more from the first 2 series, I thought, look, we've done Flux recently, so I didn't pick a Flux either. Spoilers, yeah.
But I picked very deliberately 2 stories I remember loving, 2 stories I remember hating, and 2 I was like a bit meh about. So I think whichever way you slice and dice it, I've got a pretty good selection going on here. It's not just stories what I loved or stories what I hated.
It's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum, absolutely. So we're going to kick off with the Saranga Conundrum for me.
I'm going to guess this was one you hated.
Yes, I chose it, Dave, because it's an episode I remember I really didn't like. Basically, I thought it was dumb. And now, we were some way into the episode. I say we, it was just me watching it. I don't know why I'm using the royal we. And I was thinking, nothing really bad has happened so far. But it didn't last for the whole episode, and by the end I was confident it's not a great story. But what is interesting is I found it was actually a lot darker and a lot more emotional across the board than I remember, which are things that really appeal to me. But it still constantly undercuts itself with comedy, either the bloke who's pregnant or the way the Pating looks. I think if we ditched the Pating for something scarier, whether it's an eldritch horror from the dawn of time or some sort of sentient virus or something, the threat becomes something equally as destructive as a Pating, which is eating the spaceship. But it stops being a comedy moment that, oh, look, it's this little cute thing. Oh, it's eating everything. Because that just takes you out of the story. Something also needs to be done in the story with this storyline of the legendary general who, for some ungodly reason, isn't being seen to by the military's doctors. It's all a bit cack-handed. Chibnall obviously wanted a strong, legendary woman with an imminent demise to be on this little ship and to fulfill the story, but he doesn't really sell the reasoning around her being on this little ship in the first place well enough for it to hang together. Her storyline feels off target. But in the end, it's better than I remember, and I will happily say that. It's still not great. I'm not saying it's great. I wouldn't go showing this to a friend to get them into Doctor Who, but it's a real 6 out of 10 effort, and like I say, I was some way into the episode thinking nothing bad's happened. So I felt a lot more disposed to it than I did the first time around.
That's really interesting and kind of pleasing to hear. I think what you're saying about the Pating is correct. If you buy into that as a really wacky concept, the episode probably lands a bit better than if you go, well, if you don't buy into it. And I think there's also perhaps a sense in which it might outstay its welcome a bit, and maybe there's an initial like, oh, that's a cool idea, but doesn't sustain an episode, which I think was sort of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, interesting.
Alrighty, shall we go back to the list?
We shall. Demons of the Punjab. Chibbers!
Oh, snap!
A first snap. Excellent.
Well, you can go first because I was just talking.
Look, I have identified this before as probably my favourite of the era, and I'll say up front, there was nothing in my rewatch that changed that view. I thought this was extremely well-made Doctor Who, and again, watching it just as its own thing, if anything, probably enhanced that. Patel, I thought, does a really good job of setting up the story, setting up the location. He sets up danger and threat and tension very quickly, and then you have what you think is the first explanation, but that's not true. And then you have the twist on that, then the other twist on that, then the real danger is actually, it was us all along sort of thing. And so there's a really effective way in which he keeps you interested. And there was one point I thought, wow, this is the exciting conclusion. Hang on, it's only been 20 minutes. Oh, there's more exciting conclusion to come, which really, really worked well. Again, it looks great. The location footage is really good. It puts us in history and it makes comment without making lecture, which I thought was really good. I mentioned before that even by the Ghost Monument, you could see the show becoming the Doctor and Graham show. And I think here you can see they're now writing Graham moments because they know that Bradley Walsh does the mentor, arm around the shoulder. Let me tell you about life, my perspective from my, everyday down-to-earth Graham perspective. He starts to get those speeches, and that was here. And he does it well, but I did see the script pieces working in that, which perhaps is a reflection of the fact that I now know that's becomes a bit of a trope in the show, so that was perhaps a distraction. But I was thoroughly engrossed in this, and I just think it's really good Doctor Who.
Yeah, look, I concur with all of that, and I will retort by talking through my notes. I chose this because it's an episode I remember really liking, so it's one of the love episodes for me. This one, when I rewatched it, is even better than I remembered. The first thing that really struck me about it was the music. The score in this is excellent, and I'd completely forgotten they even do the closing credits in that style of music.
Yes, me too, and that's so good, isn't it?
Yeah, it gets the drums and the wailing sort of voice and all of that stuff. It's wonderful. And thinking about this in relation to the Saranga Conundrum, which is literally the previous episode, both have heavy moments. This one is obviously heavier in general, and being a real world situation has extra gravity on top of the heaviness in the script.
Yeah.
But I make the point that both are heavy, yet this one never undercuts itself with the silly humour. We don't go from brother threatening brother to an alien who looks silly, and we go, oh, look at that funny alien. We have an occasional one-liner here and there, but nothing comedic that undercuts things. The story knows it's heavy, and it knows what it wants to say and how to say it. The Tsuranga conundrum wants to have heavy moments, but like some child who can't express their emotions properly, constantly goes and blows it every 5 minutes. And that's come across more than ever in this rewatch as I look at these two episodes back to back. So in the end, it's better than I remember. I already liked it to begin with. Even the aliens, which I've railed against for years, wondering, why are they there? Why don't we just have an historical? Even they felt right this time. So in my mind, this is pushing up. This is 9 out of 10 stuff. This is great stuff. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, that's really interesting and really pleasing, because I'm obviously a big fan as well. And something that I didn't have in my notes, but now that you're talking, I think is actually quite obvious, is that this is an era that works at its best when it's playing things straight.
Yeah.
And when it plays things straight, I think it lands very, very well. And perhaps some of its weaker ones are ones where either because they're trying to be a bit different, or they're trying to be a bit quirky, or maybe they just don't want to look like they're taking themselves too seriously. They don't always play them as straight. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, like to go back to Tsuranga Conundrum, the scene at the end where the Doctor invokes this sort of prayer for the dead military commander, as she's intoning that, it's like, oh man, this is so... Look, I'm surprised Chibnall didn't have the pating run in and fart or something halfway through that. But that doesn't happen, of course. And all of that is really, really nice, but constantly in that script undercut with comedy all the time.
Kablam. Chibbers.
Great.
Let me say, I watched this almost by accident, because my modus operandi was to watch an episode, then go back to the menu and see what I felt like watching next. The problem was I enjoyed Demons of the Punjab so much that
you kept watching.
That it just scrolled into the next episode. I'm like, that's cool, I'll just keep watching it. Before I knew it, Kablam had become my third pick. So there was no method to this whatsoever, other than I was totally captured by the story, and the computer did what it was meant to do. It's like, well, if you're liking this, just keep watching us, please. Yeah. And I did. So that was good. Yeah, Kablam was really interesting, and I walked away from it, again, enjoying the story, but appreciating it in a slightly different way to what I did first. And partly because I think my memories of the hot take were really clouded in a lot of other hot takes and a lot of reactions since, where people drew various bits of message or various bits of allegory from it, and there was almost a sort of a mini culture war over the episode. But as I watched it back, and you can't help it, you've sort of got that fan debate in the back of your mind when you watch it. I thought that none of it on any side was kind of warranted, because watch this back and it's actually got a lot of real moral ambiguity in it. And there are a lot of occasions when a character will say something that in writing is a positive thing, but the way it's delivered, you can see that they think that, well, it's an ambiguous thing. So where characters give lines about, well, they're required to have 10% of humans as the workforce, you watch the reaction, you go, they're like, well, it's good that there are some humans with work, and it's good that we have some employment, but gee, it's only 10%. Well, why can't it be? There are lots of the debates in there that kind of happen in there. I think that Charlie's motivation is shown to be well meant, but what he does with that motivation is shown to be wicked. Charlie isn't just dealt with as a villain. He's given a chance to redeem himself and to survive, but he chooses not to for dramatic reasons. So I actually think there's a lot more ambiguity in this story, including the ending, than I think fans would get on a hot take. And I think this is therefore one that is really deserving of the rewatch. I think the setup is really good. It's a really interesting premise. Again, it's Doctor Who doing that thing that's very familiar and making it a Doctor Who concept. The robots are creepy. It throws a couple of punches, things like Kira's death. Charlie isn't a black and white villain. He's a nice guy that means well, but he's just gone to a really terrible place with it. It drags a little bit in the middle. I think it sort of goes around in circles for a bit, which on a rewatch you kind of notice. But I actually think there's a lot of depth to this that people don't appreciate on the first watch. And it's well made. And I think that this is going to also age quite well. I think it's going to age better than a lot of people expect it to.
That's really interesting to hear because, you talk about that culture war stuff and let's put cards on the table. People out there, especially on Twitter, have this pathological hatred of Amazon, and that's what they are equating it all to. And the plot that this guy is going to send out these explosive packages to customers, people are like, yeah, just stick it to Amazon sort of thing. I would say to them, what if that was your dad getting a package from the Kablam service that he uses and he gets blown up by this terrorist? You're still on the terrorist side? So there is so much ambiguity in this that I think people, it just flew over their heads. They were just so determined to say, I don't like Amazon, therefore the way this show sort of stuck up for Amazon-like companies is bad, is evil. And it's like, no, I think there's more to it. And I think I'd like to watch it again too. I didn't on this time around, obviously. But I would like to reappraise that ambiguity myself to really be across it. I think I've got the right of it on first watch. I certainly wasn't taking this ideological, I hate Amazon, therefore this story sucks angle, which so many people did. But I think even I could get something out of rewatching it.
Yeah, or even people who came to it from the other side of that sort of culture debate, I think will realise that there's a lot more grey than there was. But the other thing is it uses the four members of the crew really well.
Right.
Which is a rare thing, and it's something I want to come back to at the end.
Okay.
The Witchfinders. It takes you away. The Battle of Ranskor Av Kolos. Chibbers! Oh, no! Another snap! Well, I led on our last snap, Rob, and I've just spoke for 2 episodes, so why don't you lead us off here?
Sure. Okay. This is one I chose, Dave, because it's an episode I remember hating. I remember being just totally disappointed with the story, and I thought to myself, has it got any better, 5 years later? 5 years, my God. So now, I kept waiting for the story to turn bad, and it never did. Is that shocking? Is that a shocking way to start this?
No, it's an interesting way to start it.
Okay. There were certainly things that annoyed me. The whole backstory feels very messy at first until it's explained that Tim Shaw arrived and the Ux worshipped him. But I'm still unclear as to what all the battles were that happened prior, what they were about, or why they had collected planets in jars, or how collecting planets in jars was fine, but if they had one more planet, that was a really bad idea, or how those planets in jars could be reconstituted by, like just adding water to powdered milk sort of thing at the end of the episode. So there are bits I'm still unclear about. There are things that annoyed me, but the story never went as bad as I thought it did. There are some great moments when Graham realises Tim Shaw's there, and he takes the doctor aside and he says, if I see this prick, I'm going to kill him. And the doctor is all sanctimonious and, is doing the whole, if you do that, you can't travel with me. Even though she's killed loads of people in her life. And if you do that, you're as bad as him. And Bradley Walsh is just quietly, no, I'm not having that. It's a really well-written, really well-acted scene. Overall, though, I think the episode feels a bit like Chibnall's stressing about writing it and thinking, oh my God, it's the finale. Big idea, big idea, big idea, big idea. Does any of it work? Does it bollocks? But we need to put something out there. Here it is. So in the end, this feels bizarre to say, but this is absolutely better than I remember. That doesn't mean I'm giving it a free pass, and there are still all those things I shake my head at. But as I just mentioned, I have to be honest, it's way better than in my memory. And it's really quite competent in a number of areas, and I can't believe I'm saying any of this, Dave.
Well, I watched it as well, and I picked it for a very similar reason. I didn't go in, as you did, with a very deliberate too good, too medium, too bad, but I did go in knowing I wanted to have a good mix and just not just watch all my favourites. Mm-hmm. And I did sort of think, look, I remember this is an episode that we didn't really like. It's certainly copped a lot of flack in social media over the last few years, and I thought I actually don't remember anything about it. So I'll check it in. And I had a similar experience to you in that I'm watching this, and again, divorced of it needing to do the heavy lifting and meet the expectations of being a season finale, which in the Moffat era and the RTD era were a very particular thing. There was a big series finale, and I think we were coming in with those expectations.
Whereas in classic Doctor Who, we never had such a thing.
No.
We just had a story and it would end.
No, that's exactly right. So I think when you divorce it again from those expectations and from where it sits in the show and just take it as an adventure, again, I was watching it and going, I'm not hating this. This is okay. Yep. Interestingly, though, I've also made notes about exactly the scene that you made, where I have talked about the really clunky writing that both actors are struggling to deliver. So what you said was well written and well acted, I've said is like a really clunky moment that slowed the story down and dragged it down a bit. So,
oh my God.
That's really... And folks, we did not plan this at all. We have both watched that series. We've both picked that episode and taken that story in that way really, really differently. Look, like you, I think that the conclusion is a little bit just sort of, why is that happening? Oh, okay, fine, whatever. I'm not sure that the, what's the name? The Zimshar villain. I'm not sure that Tim Shaw. No, I can't say that. It's the guy from the Demtel ads.
And from the National Press Club as well.
He's from the National Press Club. He's on Canberra Radio now or something, I think.
That's right,
I don't think that he's got quite the gravitas that Chibnall thought he would have, and that I don't think he therefore quite carries the finale or really is frankly worthy of the rematch. So it doesn't quite have the intensity it was meant to. Is it an outright classic? No. Is it a stinker though? No, I don't think it is. As a piece of 50-minute television, as a bit of a fun adventure, I thought this was fine.
Yeah, that's my big takeaway. I'm not suddenly saying this is a forgotten classic that everyone should go and watch. But I am saying it's way better than I remember, and it's way better than I've talked it down for over the past 5 years.
Yeah, likewise. So look, we are at the end of Chibnall's first season. I've watched 4, you've watched 3. Mm-hmm. And we know neither of us have any fluxes, so let's keep going.
Okay.
Resolution. Spyfall Part 1. Spyfall Part 2. Orphan 55. Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror.
Chibbers!
Oh, I thought we needed one somewhere. Go on.
All right, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. This is one of mine that was in the meh category. I remember thinking it was an interesting ep and had a great guest cast, but something had stopped it from being great. That was my memory of it. So now, I still see this as an interesting one, Dave. The sets, the costumes, the locations look great. The guy playing Tesla is fabulous, as is the Edison character. But then we get to the Skithra, who seem like a poor man's Rachnos. And zapping their ship with Tesla's tower seems like such low-hanging fruit. I saw a much more interesting direction this story could have gone with the Orb of Thassa. They get the Orb of Thassa and they say this comes from the ancients. They were used to spread knowledge. But oh no, the Orb's been reprogrammed by the Skithra, and it isn't spreading knowledge anymore and has nothing to do with the ancients, etc., etc. And I'm like, oh my God, that was the story, guys. Have Edison and Tesla competing over getting information from the orb from these ancients. And you're trying to stop them both. You're trying to keep them apart. You're trying to keep one from grabbing the orb from the other. Or is that too cerebral and the audience wants, oh, here are some ugly aliens and we need to zap their spaceship? So in the end, it falls a little more on the good side than the meh side of the first time I watched it, but only a little bit. So not a huge change for me. It started all right in my memory, and it's still all right. It's a 7 out of 10 effort. Not much variation in this one, and I as I say, I saw a better way this story could have gone when I rewatched it. Yeah,
interesting. I don't remember a lot about this. I do remember I was a little bit more down on it than you were on the hot take, but yeah, maybe that's another one that I need to rewatch. Right, we've now watched 4 episodes. Back to the list.
Yes.
Fugitive of the Jadoon, Chibbers.
Great.
This is one that I did flag, I think, in our last monthly episode when we discussed the topic, that I was absolutely always going to go back and watch. The reason is twofold. 1, because I do have very fond memories of it. 2, because of the role that it sort of has taken on in Doctor Who mythology. And 3, because I know that it's an episode where, when I watched it the first time, a lot of my enjoyment was from the, oh my God, wow, what's happening? And does it hold up when you know what's going to happen?
Yeah, you've mentioned this many times on the show, even before we started planning this episode, that it was something you were interested in revisiting one day.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I have, and I've got to say it does hold up very, very well. Now, again, if I was planning this list of 6 to watch, I don't know that I would have watched both Punjab and Jadoon, because they are both Vinny Patel episodes, and maybe that's not,
of course.
That's a bit unfair. But as I said, my gut said this is where to go, so that's what happened. And again, you see, watching them both sort of within a week of each other, Patel has this really good way of every 5 or 6 minutes just finding another little action beat or another little plot beat that helps to ramp up the tension. And I think that's what works very well in his writing, and I think it works very well here. Because as I'm watching this, again, Ruth is an even more engaging character now than she was the first time, because the first time you're watching it, you're going, okay, what's happening? Who's the fugitive? What's going on? And because you know that she's going to turn out to be the fugitive, you're just like, hey, actually, she's really engaging. And I kind of feel a bit sorry for her when the tourist is like, oh, maybe I'll come back. And she's like, no, you're not going to. And I maybe felt a little bit guilty because I've done that before. Like, you know, oh, maybe I'll come back. Like, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
So, that, you know, it sort of felt really human. The Jadoon are really good, and they're the right sort of excitement machine for that. The way that the revelation that she's got a police box is directed is really strong, and so it still holds up. So that first 2/3 I thought was incredibly exciting and incredibly good, and I do think that Patel has enough little beats in there to keep the tension going. Did the back third hold up quite as well? No.
Ooh.
I think that when you do take away the revelations from there, all you've got is about 10 to 15 minutes of 3 or 4 people talking in a room, and it does actually just feel like 2 or 3 people talking in a room. When you know that the whole, how did this work? What's this? Did you come before me? Did I come before you? It's kind of going to go nowhere. Like they play with it a little bit, and you've got that whole sort of Irish thing and the timeless child, but it's never really quite resolved. It's never made quite clear, even in flux, sort of how Ruth as the Doctor works. When you sort of know that's sort of coming, you're like, well, I don't care about any of that because I know that it's not going to be anything. It is just sort of people talking in a room, and it's very good acting, and they are very good actors, but I thought that the back third did fall down a little bit. So I still think it's a great episode, and that first 2/3 is excellent. The back part, though, was a little bit weaker, but where it's good, it's really, really good. And again, John Barrowman, the first 2/3 of John Barrowman, where he's having fun, he's flirting with Graham and everything, and you go, yeah, this is fun. You know, this is what Captain Jackie's meant to be. And you know, look, we know John Barrowman's got his faults. We go, look, it's kind of working here. Then when he starts doing all his, you must not give the lone Cyberman what he wants, or it's the end of the world, and you sort of go, well, she did, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
So again, the back third there falls down again as well. So a mixed bag there. I still think it's a great episode. The first 2/3 held up. The back part didn't.
Did you like it better or worse than when you first saw it?
On balance, probably a little bit worse. But, you know,
Really?
we're talking about going from like a 9 to an 8. But it did drift a little bit because of that sort of back part of it.
Well, this was never an episode that really wowed me. It had the big wow moment, but the episode overall never wowed me, so maybe this is one I should scratch a note down and go and rewatch just to see how I feel about it too, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that would be very interesting.
Okay.
Praxius. Chibbers.
Okay.
This was my number 6, and this was one that I really agonised over. Those people who have been following me on Twitter in the last week will have seen that I did sort of lock in those first couple that I wanted to watch, and then there were a couple more I did watch, and then I sort of got down to that last 6th slot, and I was jumping around, sort of wanting to watch something that I had very ambiguous views on, and I was in the end tossing up between this, Can You Hear Me, and Orphan 55, and I just went with Praxius for gut instinct, frankly, and again, I didn't mean to watch 2 Pete McTighe episodes. It's just where my gut took me. Mm-hmm. I didn't remember a lot about Praxius. And as I'm watching it, I thought, this is fantastic. This is an amazing, energetic start to the episode. It, again, looks spectacular. That, I think, is a bit of a theme that we've both been talking about with this era. And it moves from place to place really, really well. That adventure is really well set up. It doesn't stop for the first probably 30 minutes. Unfortunately, it then really does stop. And there is a huge amount of people in a room standing around explaining the plot. I was reminded at this stage that my big criticism of it when I watched it for the hot take was, I don't know what's going on. And unfortunately, when I watched it again cold, I also got thin and thought, I have no idea what just happened. So so in that respect, it's probably held about level. The first half an hour, fantastic. The last 20 minutes, bemusing.
Right.
So this is probably the one that hasn't gone up or down. It's stayed where I had it the first time.
Right. I remember not liking this at the time, so this would have been not even maybe even more in my hate category, but I already had done 2 episodes I hate, so it didn't end up in my list. Obviously, I've not snapped with you here. I have very vague memories of it involving ocean rubbish or plastics or something like that. I'm on track. Okay, so I remember that much about it, but I don't remember a whole lot about it except I didn't like it.
Yeah, and Doctor Who can do lecture. You think about John Pertwee giving one of his mankind can destroy the world and he probably will speeches, and John Pertwee can kind of do that because it's John Pertwee and he does moral outrage really well. Or at least I think he does. I know that some people find he doesn't. That's okay. There is a lot of moral outrage in this about the plastic and about pollution, all the rest of it. And I think that whereas in a lot of other episodes, I've really enjoyed Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor because of that fun, very adventurous, very easy to watch aspect. In the back part of this, she does start to become a lot more morally outraged and, hey kids, this is the lesson of the episode. And I don't think she succeeds in doing that quite as well.
Right. Interesting.
So I've done 6 now. Rob, you've still got 2 to go.
2 of mine are out there still, Dave, yes.
Excellent. Well, I'll keep reading. Can you hear me?
Almost, but no.
The Haunting of Villa Diodati.
Shippers!
I thought so. Is this another you all really liked?
This is a love one, yes.
Let's find out if you still love it.
Yeah, I chose it because I've believed for the longest time that this is my favourite episode of the Whittaker era. Yeah. And now, I think it's still great. But it's been so long between viewings, I actually surprised myself at first with how long this episode goes on with just hauntings and the house changing configuration and Shelley being missing. This is a whole storyline that goes on forever before Ashad the Cyberman turns up, which was actually my main memory of the story. That's the one with Ashad. He turns up and does all this stuff. And of course, when Ashad turns up, he's not there for laughs. He breaks necks. In a moment we think he's sharing some vulnerability, he suddenly starts talking about slashing his children's throats. I mean, this is how you do a Cyberman. Obviously, he's got human qualities, which are related to what I'm just talking about here, like some of this dialogue he's delivering about, slash their throats, etc. But in general, I think you have to make Cybermen fearsome. You don't want to mess with a Cyberman. They're not tin soldiers to be mown down in their dozens. And I think just one Cyberman comes across so well in this story. Also, unrelated, the Doctor showing Shelley his death to make the Cyberium think that he was dying and it needed to jump out of his body. That's dark as hell, and it's so inspired. Oh my God, I love that. So, in the end, aside from making Byron act quite stupidly in one scene, where he leaps behind a woman and wants the woman to shield him, I just don't buy Byron doing that. It's out of sync with how he acts elsewhere in the same episode, let alone what we know of him in real life. Like, he was a really adventurous kind of do-anything kind of guy. I think this episode is really great stuff. It was good then, it's good now. Along with that earlier episode I was mentioning that didn't have a lot of change, this has probably the least change for me as well. It's a 9 out of 10 still. It's just great. It has so much to it. It's fun. It's in a period house, which, as I always say, the BBC does so well. I would have loved to have seen more Jodie episodes like this.
That's really interesting, really good. Did you find your knowledge of what's to come with Ashard played into your viewing this time at all, or you just took him as he was in the episode?
Well, again, it did from the point of view that I was wondering, when does this guy turn up? I'm watching this whole episode where they're getting around the house, they go upstairs and then they're back in the same room, the house changes configuration. Where is Shelley? We don't know. Graham keeps seeing this maid and a little girl and they bring him some snacks, and then we learn at the end that they had nothing to do with the story, so were they really ghosts? All of that storyline is happening, and the TARDIS team is split up quite nicely. All of that happens for ages before Ashad turns up. Well, what feels like ages. Yeah, so it did play into my memory a bit, because I was thinking, when's this bucker showing up? Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, look, we've got one more. Ascension of the Cybermen. The Timeless Children. Revolution of the Daleks.
Chibbers!
Great.
So here we are. We're in a special now, not an actual series episode. And Revolution of the Daleks is one of my meh episodes. This is one I couldn't quite put my finger on at the time. I knew it wasn't a stinker by any stretch, but I knew I didn't really rate it like I rate some episodes. So now, I'm going to say this one surprised me quite a bit. I liked nearly all of it. A few moments took me out, like when Yaz and Jack have a lengthy D&M about life with the Doctor. Jack's saying to her, you've just got to grab the opportunity while it's there, and all this. And it's really sweet and it's really touching, and they've bonded amazingly. It's really well done. And then literally in the next scene, Yaz smashes him with a one-liner about how needy he is. And you see why it's there. You can picture a certain kind of fan at home just chortling away, like, oh, she said he's needy, and oh, isn't he needy? But it just makes no sense. There's no way you would really bond with someone almost to the point of tears and then suddenly in the next minute just burn them with a one-liner, So that just felt out of place. And later there's a scene where Ryan, and I think I talked about this on our hot take, where Ryan gives life advice to the Doctor. Like, sure, this teenager who's always screwing things up is now like Gandhi all of a sudden, and is giving this advice, or he's like the Dalai Lama or something, He's giving this advice to someone who's lived thousands of years and more lifetimes than he ever will. Just stupid. But outside of that, even that opening bit where the Doctor hasn't bothered to break out of space jail for 20 years, that didn't bother me at all. And I found myself really enjoying the episode. So in the end, Dave, we've got Daleks who are properly deadly and merciless. The Chibnall death count is off the charts in this one. Daleks mow down what seems like dozens of people in every other scene. And even the bi-fam, and I hate the term fam, but even the bi-fam moment at the end when they all put their heads together and it's shot from below. It's like that scene in The Doors where the Doors have just taken drugs and they've got their heads together and they're having a moment. It reminds me of that. It's just great. So this was a real surprise packet. I really enjoyed it. I forget his name now, but the American character Chris Noth plays, who they've had back twice now in the series. I enjoyed all his one-liners and stuff. I thought this was really great, and it's definitely not a meh episode for me anymore.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So look, between us, we've watched 10 episodes.
Yes.
Look, had we sort of had 8, I would have watched one from Flux, and I probably would have watched something like Sea Devils. But again, look, we're approaching well past the hour mark of the podcast, and that would have added a bit too much, which is a shame, but we have to be strict about these things.
Yeah.
Something that I've noticed, I think in your description of that last episode there, the 10th we've talked about, is that the first time either of us have mentioned Yaz or Ryan?
Oh, yes. We've been talking about Graham a fair bit.
We've been talking about Graham. We've been talking about the Doctor, but neither of us brought them up. And that very nicely moves into a point that I wanted to make. Having watched them all, I thought that Jodie Whittaker was better than I remember, and particularly when she's having fun. She's a really engaging Doctor, and I think she's really good, and I think will, again, age well. Graham, we said at the time, was excellent. Bradley Walsh is very, very good. They quickly work out how to write him really, really well and write to his strengths. So both of them stood up really well. I didn't notice Yaz or Ryan much at all in any of these. Yaz occasionally gets a couple of cool moments. Ryan occasionally got a couple of nice lines. I think in Praxis he had a couple of really good lines. They were used fairly well in Kablam, but mostly they were window dressing for me. They were just there. They didn't stand out. And I was not surprised about Yaz, because I think we've talked at length about Yaz being underused. Yes. I was surprised at just how little I got out of Ryan. Not that I disliked him, but just he didn't do a lot.
Yeah, I'd concur with that, actually. Now that you've raised that, I mean, again, Yaz, not a surprise, but Ryan, yeah, not as present, at least in these episodes, as we thought.
Yeah, look, maybe we've done him and indeed her a bit of a disservice by the ones we picked, and that's part of picking these, in a semi-random kind of way. But look, Rob, I opened with some thoughts. It's your turn to give us some overarching views of the Whittaker-Chibnall era.
In every case, I think my rewatchers saw my opinion go up of the stories I'd picked. Sometimes just a little, sometimes a lot. Sometimes stuff that really bothered me at the time wasn't even a blip on the radar anymore. Other times stuff would happen and I'd be like, yeah, I remember hating that bit. I still hate it now. But overall, the episodes were better. Without watching them weekly, without being invested that this is Doctor Who right now, with my foot now off the accelerator a little, if I can put it that way, I enjoyed all of them more. Well, Rob, you might say, why not stop doing hot takes and do your reviews a week after the ep goes out or something like that? And no, this comes back to what I was talking about earlier. I think it's really important to do a hot take while you're still in the zone with the episode. You want to know what your thoughts were straight away. So I don't think that's the answer. I do think it's interesting, though, to go back after a period of time like we've done here. And in terms of the Whittaker era overall, I too, Dave, and this is not a setup, think it's going to grow in popularity. Part of me can't believe I'm saying that because I had some negative times with the era, but I think it's true. I know I've seen it in past eras, especially when a new crop of fans come along. Look at the way newer fans came to Colin and were like, oh, wow, his costume's wild, and oh, the way he's a prick to people, that's really awesome. And he was so hard done by, by the BBC. This is our man. And anyone who was there at the time for the Baker era is like, what the actual F? What are these people on about? I think that's going to happen more with Whittaker's episodes too. I think it's got its own fan base now, but I think in the future, even in the Disney era, in the next year or two, as new people come along and go, oh, what's this female doctor all about? They're going to watch these stories and think, this is bloody great. And they're not going to have any of the same thoughts we had about these stories. And I think that's fair, because there's a solid base of genuinely good stories here. Not just the ones I reviewed, not just the ones you reviewed either, as I deliberately chose some from the dodgier side of the tracks. But as more people come to them and don't have that pressure of it being the current era, and maybe they hear that the past generation of fans really didn't like this era and the ratings plummeted and such, they're going to be like, aha, here's something I can love. Here's something I can champion. And hey, after watching a few episodes, I don't even have to lie. I actually like this stuff. It's good. That's what I imagine people will be doing in the future. And I think it's perfectly justified by the episodes I've rewatched here, and I dare say others in these 3 series.
Yeah, look, whilst every moment of every episode I watched didn't necessarily go up, my overall enjoyment of the era certainly did. And I don't think it's just a coming back to them in the cold take, and I don't think it's just the passing of time, because I think that as much as I enjoy the Capaldi era, it's not going to age quite as well, because it is a very particular thing with a very particular taste. And the Matt Smith era, which is less to my liking, again, is a very particular thing with a very particular taste. And some people love it and some people don't. And I think both those eras will have their fans and have their detractors, because they will work or they won't. And those doctors will work for some and not work for others. But I do think that with the Whittaker era, and indeed with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor herself, there is a level of fun and accessibility and simplicity to this era that maybe we didn't appreciate or understand when we watched it the first time, but I think is going to really lend it some favourability in the years to come. That's really sort of all I've got, Rob. You haven't spoken too much, though, about Whittaker's doctor herself. Any final thoughts on her from you?
You mentioned, Dave, liking her more, and I would concur that I actually liked her more in this rewatch too. You brought up when she's being fun. I actually enjoyed her when she was being a bit morose and sad, like when she did that prayer in the Saranga Conundrum, or like when they're walking along in Demons of the Punjab, knowing that rifle shot is about to go out, and it goes out, and the look on her face. I liked some of the sadder moments that she did. And I do remember that episode where she stepped out onto a ruined Gallifrey that's in an episode that neither of us watched. And she's like, and just the way her face fell there. So I've actually enjoyed some of her more dramatic moments, I've got to say.
Interesting. Okay, well, look, we've both come at it from different perspectives, and we've both approached this assignment in very different ways, but walked out with positive takes, with positive vibes. And that's, that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, and look, I think your comparison to Smith and Capaldi, without ongoing arcs, I mean, we do have this, what's the timeless child, what's all that going to be about stuff going on, but outside of that, there's no what's the hybrid, what's Lady Me, who is the impossible girl, all of that layered stuff, which if you went back and just watched an individual episode, and I think this is what you're probably getting at from the Capaldi era or Smith, you'd be like, whoa, what was this all about again? These are more standalone stories on the whole.
And I think that serves it well.
Absolutely.
So, look, that's what we thought about the Jodie Whittaker, Chris Chibnall era. Chibbers, just one last time.
Chibbers! Say his name 3 times, Dave. He'll come.
Oh, I won't do that then. So, as always, look, please let us know what you thought of our cold takes. If you have any opinions of your own, if you've gone back and watched some of these episodes off the back of the episode, would love to hear from you. One person, when they heard our plan for this episode, did send us a tweet, our good friend Mike Solko. What did he have to say, Rob?
Oh, you want me to read it, Dave? Okay.
Well, I haven't got it in front of me. I'm sitting in a hotel room.
Sure. Mike Solko says, despite taking some admirable and overdue steps forward, this was the most vanilla era of Who since the Davo era.
I had to make you read that out.
And on Twitter, he then posted a GIF of an explosion. And Mike, just for you, here's an explosion.
So that's a tweet from Mike Solko. We have some emails though, Rob.
We certainly do, Dave. I think you've got the first one.
Yes, I do. It's from Baz Warrington. Hello, chaps. As I'm walking along listening to your List Makers pod, always an interesting chat, I was wondering if you had the subject of top 5 almost companions in the hat. Those characters that popped up in a story and you would have loved to have joined the TARDIS crew. Maybe they'd have replaced one of the current crew or not. There are a lot of contenders for sure. Keep up the good work, Baz. The answer is no, we haven't got that in the hat, but we do now.
Very good. I'm looking forward to doing that when it gets pulled.
Yeah, I think that's a very good topic. Thank you for suggesting it.
Absolutely. I'm going to read one now from our great mate on Twitter, Pat Howe. Pat says, hello, Rob and Dave. Some thoughts for your upcoming episode on the Chibnall-Whittaker era. I'm from a music background and have found over the years that there are fundamental differences in the way people listen and respond to music. For example, some people are more drawn to structure, melody, and lyricism. Others to more sonic extremes where conventional elements are less appealing than dissonance, noise, and abrasive textures. The former might prefer the Beatles or ABBA. The latter, Napalm Death or Lee Perry. This is a long-winded way of saying that I think there are similarly different motivations for television and film viewers. Some of us need strong narratives and realistic characterization. Others might be more bothered by aesthetics and sheer visual spectacle. For me, the Whittaker era has been a disappointment in aspects of the writing, especially the excess of exposition and incomplete plotting. But visually, sonically, and in the quality of the acting, I think it's been great. I think it could have been better overall, but I do value the good stuff and hope people recognise it. Please don't feel you have to read all of this. Oh, too late, Pat. I've read all of it. Just trying to articulate that as consumers, we differ in what we look for in any medium. Thanks for your continuing brilliance and entertainment. Looking forward to more Beatles and Spacefall as well, from Pat.
Thank you, Pat. That's a really thoughtful comment. And look, I think you're absolutely right. Two people can hear the same piece of music and take away very different things just in what they perceived of it, whether they liked it or not, because some things work for some and some things work for others, and that's okay. And I think that's very much the case with Doctor Who as well. A really good analogy.
Yeah, I really loved the examples there.
Yeah. I have one from David Harmsworth. Hi guys, much as I'm a big fan of the main podcast too, I do have a soft spot for the list makers, and this month's instalment definitely delivered. Thanks for sharing such personal moments and memories, which I'm sure will have resonated with many of your listeners, even if their own key moments are from different times or eras. It certainly got me thinking about mine, whether it's the first time I saw The Five Doctors on original broadcast and the wow factor of it being my first multi-doctor story, or when my best mate from school and I went to the Doctor Who exhibition at Longleat. So many props and costumes and monsters up close on display. It blew my mind, even if one of them was Fifi from the Happiness Patrol. I also have very fond memories of sitting in our local library, sifting through card after card on their microfiche reader, looking for target books or non-fiction Who books that they could order in for me, and the thrill of finding something new. Speaking of libraries, I'm sure Mark Douglas will be really chuffed when he hears the last of your picks. I'm looking forward to his reaction.
I should jump in here and say David and Mark are mates over in the UK.
That's right, yes. My other short topic is that I'm typing this from home, not hospital.
Yay!
Chemo, yeah, good news. Chemo is still ongoing and the road ahead remains very uncertain, but I'm a lot better day to day at the moment, so the hospital team is happy for me to stay home as long as I stay out of trouble. Amongst other things, hopefully this means I will see Mark in person soon. Best wishes to you both. Look forward to the next edition of the main podcast in due course. David, very positive email there in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And as RoboCop would say, stay out of trouble. I think that's what he says in the first film. I'll have to look that up now.
Stay out of trouble.
We have one more from you, Rob.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to read from our longtime correspondent, Dave Young. Dear Rob and Dave, long time since I wrote, but inspired by your List Makers episode on Who Memories. It got me thinking as a long-time viewer and lover of the program, what were my top 5 memories? Number 1, getting a Dalek birthday cake for my 6th birthday, which my parents had made especially by a family friend. Dalek mania was still at its height. Number 2, running a Doctor Who club at my school and one of the pupils announcing he knew Mike Tucker, who we then invited in to do a talk to the club. He arrived and was fantastic, bringing with him videos of how some effects in Season 1 were produced, and also the original K9, which had just featured in School Reunion. So I can proudly say that K9 sat on my desk. Number 3, my wife, on first meeting me and seeing my large Who collection and thinking, oh no, he's got a hobby. But seeing above that, and now, if not a great fan, she'll still watch the show and allow me my indulgent purchases, even if I'm now buying the same stories for the 3rd time, just in a different format. One of the many reasons I love her so much. She has spotted, however, that when I get theatre tickets, the show often features ex-doctors or companions, and wonders whether this is the sole reason for going. Number 4, seeing how the program lends itself to generation upon generation and from culture to culture. I currently have 4 Ukrainian students in my form class who are regular attendees at my latest Who club, and they love it. One of them wrote his first extended piece of writing the other week in English, and of course it involved time travel and a strange blue box. There was also, of course, Oliver, who I've written to you about before, whose world was opened up by the program. He is flourishing at his new school. Number 5. The night that the first Eccleston was due to screen on the BBC, and trying desperately to tire out my then 2-year-old daughter so she would be asleep by the time it started. Then, when she was flagging, my wife taking over bedtime duties, while I raced out to collect the takeaway meal before settling down to see its glorious return. Still loving the show, and long may it continue. Best wishes from Dave Young.
That's a really good email there. Thank you for sending that in, Dave. And your comment about your now wife first seeing your collection for the first time reminded me of a scene in the movie I mentioned last month, in fact, spoiler alert, where there is a moment where one of the characters goes back to the other's apartment for the first time. Whilst it wasn't Doctor Who per se, it was a moment I think a lot of Doctor Who fans could definitely relate to, I'll just say that.
Isn't there a Queer as Folk moment where he goes back to the house and sees Daleks or something? Am I misremembering?
There is a moment where one of them takes someone back to his place thinking they're going to hook up, and when this guy sees he has a copy of Genesis of the Daleks,
That's what it is.
wants to watch that instead, yes.
Brilliant, brilliant. And also, can I just say, wouldn't it have been great to have a teacher like Dave Young at your school?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very cool. Look, Rob, we've been watching a lot of the Jodie Whittaker era of Doctor Who. What else have you been watching in the last month?
Dave, I've just been continuing with The Mandalorian and Picard. They're still my two mains at the moment. Both have delivered great episodes, I think, while some people on the internet are like, oh my god, this is awful, what are these shows doing? Star Wars is dead. Sometimes I can see where people like that are coming from when they say stuff like that, but I think both series this time around have been fine in their current runs, and I look forward to doing alternate galaxies episodes on them.
Yeah, look, I've been watching them both as well, and I'll save my comments for inevitable alternate galaxies. A couple of other things I've been watching. I did have to get a subscription to the Stan streaming service for a month so I could watch the Jodie Whittaker era, which meant there were a couple of other things that I was able to watch as well. One was the series Wolf Hall, which a lot of people have been telling me I need to watch, and I have wanted to watch, but I haven't had the right streaming service for a while. And I did watch that. It's a story set during Tudor times, but written from the perspective of Thomas Cromwell, who is an advisor first to Cardinal Wolsey and then to Henry VIII. And so he works with Catherine of Aragon, he works with Anne Boleyn. Mm-hmm. And it was extremely well done. It's got a phenomenal cast, many of them people who weren't as big a deal when this was made as they are now. People like Tom Holland, people like Thomas Sangster, people like Claire Foy, who has of course gone on to be in The Crown, and indeed Mark Rylance, who was a fairly big actor at the time, but I think he's an even bigger actor now.
Yeah.
So, like a really, really stunning cast. It's very well done. Look, I'm a big student of the Tudor era, so I did enjoy that. And I also have dipped in on Amazon to Hunters Season 1, another show that a lot of people have been saying I will really enjoy, and they're absolutely right. It is a show set in the 70s based in New York about a group of Jewish Nazi hunters.
Oh.
And it is one of those written for streaming services where they know they don't need to worry about the rating and they don't need to worry about being censored or cut, so they kind of go for it, and it's got its moments of real graphic violence, and it opens with a pretty full-on scene, in fact, and so it is quite fun, it is quite enjoyable.
Are they hunting modern Nazis, or are they back in the 60s looking for guys in South America?
So they're in the 70s looking for people who have assimilated into American culture.
Into American culture, okay.
And look, I don't think I'm giving away a spoiler to say that it does delve into some of those people who maybe were brought across by the American government for various reasons. So there are, in fact, a couple of moments where it does actually just put on screen, yes, folks, this really happened.
Hello, NASA, if you're listening.
Yes, there is in fact an episode set in Florida.
There you go.
You go.
I'm familiar with that era of history.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I thought that was a really fun show, and I would have gone on to watch season 2, but I had to watch some Jodie episodes. Not that I'm complaining.
Very good.
Next time, Rob, what are we doing?
Next time, Dave, we threw out a vote earlier this month on Twitter because we were looking for a missing adventure to read. We need time to read it for next month's show.
Yes.
And we threw out 4 names. I won't go through them, but the winner was The Shadow of Wang Chiang by David McIntyre. And so we'll be reading that and then telling you all about it and our thoughts about it on next month's show.
Yes, and this was another example where we each put forward 2 nominations without coordinating. As a result, there were 2 David A. McGinty stories that we could have picked from, which I think just shows how well regarded he is. But yes, we will be reading...
And none of them were The Dark Path.
And none of them were The Dark Path, no. No, I think we both tried to pick some less obvious ones, which I think is good.
I did, yeah.
No, I'm really looking forward to reading that one. And look, when we get to the episode next time, we will give a bit of a plot summary. So if you haven't got a copy or you haven't had time to read it, we will make sure you know the story. We won't just talk about it out of context. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking forward to that as always. But look, I've got to say, Rob, I've found this a really fun episode to make, and I found the rewatching of the Jodie Whittaker era just a really uplifting thing. I'm always happy when I enjoy Doctor Who.
Oh, absolutely. And through the Whittaker era, I did enjoy stories from time to time, like really enjoy them, genuinely enjoy them. But this time around, finding that my appreciation was going up, even of episodes that I didn't think I liked, was a really positive thing for me. So I'm so happy we did this time.
Yeah, me too. So look, on that positive note, I've been Dave.
And I've been Rob.
And we will speak again soon.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to
The Doctor Who Show with Rob and Dave.
Find us online by searching for
The Doctor Who Show.
We also love it when you write in. Drop us a line anytime at hello@thedwshow.net.